Last week in Michigan politics, campaigns in high gear here in Michigan as the major candidates vying to be the state's next U.S. Senator faced off in their first debate this week. We bring you a recap and how they're courting a key group of voters. Plus, while election season may be in full swing, that hasn't stopped action at the state capitol. The latest from Lansing and how new legislation could impact your area. I'm Josh Alburtus, and this is your 13 on your side rundown. We begin with a bipartisan group in Michigan known as the Democracy Defense Project, having released a new poll out this week looking at how confident voters are in our elections. According to the Glenn Gariff group who conducted this poll, among 12 potential concerns that they asked people to rate on a 10-point scale, 2 of those came out above a 7.0 among Democrats. Those were the Trump campaign potentially trying to engage in improper activity, followed by potential foreign interference. Among Republicans, 6 of the 12 were over a 7. Those were people not eligible to vote, possibly casting ballots, potential voting irregularities, artificial intelligence, the Harris campaign potentially conducting improper activities, foreign interference, and that election officials conducting the vote might be behind closed doors. The poll also presented respondents with 12 election practices clerks may use. Voter confidence increased dramatically in a scenario where all 12 were in place, but when asked, the majority of voters believed only 2 were current policy. But the vast majority of respondents across the board said they trust their local and county clerks. One clerk of each of the 2 major parties was on this panel this week to talk about these findings, including Kent County Clerk Lisa Posthumous-Lyons, who signaled these results could be encouraging.
If you don't remember anything from today, I hope you remember this. Our voters trust our process. They just need to know it is the process. And so again, that's where these education efforts, that's where encouraging folks to participate really are important.
And last Tuesday, local election officials from across the state looked to update the public on the steps they are taking to make sure elections are secure. They want voters to know that all election officials and poll workers receive extensive training, and they are people from your communities. The 3 Republican county clerks look to reassure voters that Michigan's process is safe and secure. Among the security measures, a system of checks and balances to verify that votes are counted accurately.
Before our elections, we test every piece of equipment to ensure accuracy. And after the election, we canvass the results. We conduct any requested recounts, and we do our post-election audits. All of these are open to the public, and we encourage folks to attend and observe.
The clerks also made note that you can sign up to become a trained election worker, receive that training, and play an important role in future elections. The mayor of Wyoming was back in court Monday over a year after he and over a dozen others were charged with allegedly acting as fake electors in Michigan's 2020 presidential election. There were 3 defendants who had their cases brought up that day, Wyoming Mayor Kent Vanderwood among them. This was a preliminary exam, meaning this is where the court heard testimony and evidence to determine whether there was enough to send the cases to trial or not. The court had heard from 2 previous groups of defendants as they've been moving along with these preliminary exams. On Monday, as it related to these 3, the court heard from a political director for the Michigan Republican Party at the time of the 2020 election, as well as the state's director of its Bureau of Elections, who testified he had received an attachment in an email from the National Archives of what he said purported to be a certificate of votes in favor of Donald Trump. He said he contacted the Attorney General's office after receiving it. Take a listen as to why.
What was it about this document that led you to the conclusion that it was, in fact, not a certificate of votes?
Well, it was the certificate of votes referred to Donald Trump, the president, and these are the Republican electors. But in fact, Joe Biden had won the election, and the electors who had been elected and sent the official certificate of votes were the Democratic Party.
The court granted Vanderwood's request to be absent from future court proceedings on account of his health. We are waiting to see what the court will decide, whether there is enough evidence here to send these cases to trial, and we'll keep you updated as it develops. The road to the White House passed through Grand Rapids last Sunday yet again, with a stop at Rosa Parks Circle from Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders.
We are here today to make sure that Kamala Harris is the next president of the United States.
He was joined with UAW President Shawn Fain as the two spoke about why they say voters should vote for Harris come November. The two touching on how they believe she would help the economy, advocate for reproductive rights, and fight climate change. Fain also spoke about how he believes Harris has already helped the manufacturing industry here in West Michigan and will continue to do so.
The Biden-Harris administration needs to be more vocal about what they've done. I mean, look right here. I mean, right close to Grand Rapids in Wyoming. A plant closed here, 10 years ago, in 2008, 2009, and they're going to build a battery plant here now. I mean, that's how you invest in American jobs. That's how you invest in manufacturing. That's what it's about.
The two had also held a rally in East Lansing later that day. Elsewhere in Michigan, the major presidential campaigns continue to be in full force in our state. Both the Republican presidential and vice presidential nominees visited the Detroit area. Senator J.D. Vance on Tuesday and former President Donald Trump on Thursday. Following right on their heels, Democratic vice presidential candidate and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz was in Macomb County on Friday. Trump used his speech to the Detroit Economic Club to speak to things including the economy and manufacturing. But one of his comments in which he claimed that if Vice President Kamala Harris was elected president, the country would, quote, end up being like Detroit, has drawn fierce pushback from many in the area. The critical battle for Michigan's open U.S. Senate seat hit another potentially decisive milestone this week. Tuesday, the two major candidates, Democrat Alyssa Slotkin and Republican Mike Rogers, had their first general election debate here in Grand Rapids. We spoke to both of the candidates afterward and bring you a recap of the debate. Debate night in Michigan with just 4 weeks to go until election night.
If you are wondering where your party has gone, come and vote for someone who actually gives a crap about you.
I would appreciate your vote on November 5th. I will have your back come November.
Democratic Congresswoman Alyssa Slotkin and former Republican Congressman Mike Rogers battling it out Tuesday to come out on top of what all signs point to be a very tight race. The debate starting with issues of national and global importance, like Hurricane Milton and ongoing conflict in the Middle East. Then homing in on issues polls suggest top the charts among Michigan voters, including the economy.
We have to absolutely become energy independent. I'm for an all of the above policy, but if we don't get gas prices down, we won't get food prices down. There is no sense from buying oil from Venezuela when we have capability here in this country.
You got to bring down costs like housing, childcare. And then number 3, you got to keep more money in your pocket that you earn, right? Taxes and tax policy. You got to do things like the Earned Child Tax Credit. Give credit to middle-class families instead of breaks to the ultra-wealthy.
To the debate on electric vehicles, given what some have seen as EV mandates for consumers and a controversial battery plan set for Mecosta County some feel is too closely tied to China.
Why in God's green earth we would cede that auto market to the Communist Party of China is beyond me.
I do not care what you want to drive, but if the answer is who's going to build them, I want that to be Team America, not Team China. I want Michigan to build them.
And touching on abortion, following the downfall of Roe v. Wade and the passage of Michigan's Proposal 3 that enshrined a right to an abortion in the state's constitution.
He does not trust you to make your own decisions about your own family planning every single time. When it comes to our rights and protecting ourselves, I think it is important that we have someone in the seat who does that.
I will do nothing when I go back to Washington, D.C., to do anything that would change what the Michigan Constitution, voted on by the people of Michigan, have given us that guidance to go back.
Both candidates coming off the stage signaling victory. But debates don't always tilt the needle. The candidates telling us they hope what got across was a contrast.
My opponent and I differ on a lot of very important issues about the future of the automobile industry and what that means for jobs here in the state of Michigan. We have big divergence there. I think people saw that tonight, and I think that's going to move their vote.
Mr. Rogers and I have very different views on things like the middle class or the future of retirement, Medicare, Social Security, our rights, right? Our rights as Americans. So I think it's important that people see that, and I think this debate did a pretty darn good job of showing those real stark differences.
And of course, many more top issues touched on in that first debate. You can find the full story up on our website, 13onyourside.com. And some of those issues were of particular importance to one group of voters who could be key this election season. Coming up, our deeper dive outside of this week's debate. We're looking into how both major candidates are vying for the votes of seniors. Some of the issues in last week's U.S. Senate debate had to deal with Social Security and Medicare programs. It's a big topic for many seniors whose votes could be key in this race. Ahead of the debate, we dug into how both sides are seeking to court this voting bloc with a unique set of issues on their minds. Here in Michigan, the state's population skews older than many other parts of the nation. Census estimates showed almost 1 in 5 people in Michigan were 65 or older in 2022, and many in this traditionally reliable voting bloc are ready to go to the polls.
It's really important that Michigan is represented in the U.S. Senate by a champion for seniors.
Among top issues for many seniors, the fate of Social Security and Medicare programs. In the race for the state's open U.S. Senate seat, both major party candidates have said they'll move to protect them, where their opponent, they've said, would work against seniors' interests.
On the issue of Medicare, prescription drugs, Social Security, the cost of health care in general for seniors, there's a pretty big difference between me and my opponent.
Democratic Congresswoman Alyssa Slotkin facing off against former Republican Congressman Mike Rogers for the seat. Slotkin touting things from her time in Congress, including insulin cost caps for seniors and price transparency. But it's not just her touting past legislative experience.
When I was in the House of Representatives, it was Part D prescription drugs was the first time we had comprehensive drug protection. Was what we did in Congress, saved the seniors thousands and thousands of dollars.
But at the time, back in the early 2000s, Medicare was not allowed to negotiate on the drug prices, a point his opponent has sought to highlight on the campaign trail.
Guess who else negotiates drug prices? Canada, the UK, pretty much every nation in the world, and we pay for their cheaper drugs, right? They get to negotiate because their governments do it. We didn't. This makes no sense.
But Rogers believes Democrats' plans that included giving the government negotiating power just a few years ago have been too fast and too furious, to the point that costs could backfire onto seniors.
Where do you come down on Medicare negotiating drug prices? What's your take on that?
So the plan that they proposed 10 years ago is very different than the plan they proposed.
Instead, putting out his own idea.
I believe in the average sales price internationally. Right now, let's take Ozempic, is $800 in the U.S., it's $80 in France. My argument is they have to pay more so we can pay less. We should not, as Americans, be subsidizing all of our international partners' drug prices.
And turning now to Muskegon County, smaller local housing supply, but also more traffic to local businesses has made short-term rentals a hot topic in some lakeshore communities. And on Tuesday night, the Muskegon City Commission approved a short-term rental ordinance after a nearly 4-hour meeting. Short-term rentals were temporarily banned earlier this year in Muskegon. However, the ordinance will not go into effect within the next 10 days because commissioners made changes to it. They added an amendment to allow a one-time transfer of the properties. People on both sides of the issue spoke during public comment.
I feel that the ordinance, as I've read it now, is pretty balanced overall. It still allows owners to continually operate right now, not taking anybody's ability to operate away. It will lower the number of STRs down to an acceptable level, giving permanent residents some relief.
The commission will vote on whether to adopt the amended ordinance at their October 22nd meeting. And leaders in Muskegon County are working to help those going through opioid addiction with money from a national settlement with various drug companies. The city of Muskegon is set to receive nearly $640,000 from the settlement over the next 15 years. City staff recommend putting that money into an addiction recovery program already being run in the county. So the money goes to agencies that specialize in opioid addiction, recovery, and intervention.
And that's really kind of what the primary focus of those opioid dollars was intended for. And this seems to us to be the easiest way to get it into the hands of local professionals who work in this field every day to have a positive impact for folks.
The city manager says this would fund an existing program put in place by the county's health department. Muskegon County itself is receiving about $11.7 million from the settlement. Lawmakers at the state capitol are still moving forward even amidst the heat of election season. What's included in the state's newest laws that may have gone under the radar this election season? That's next. And while election season is in full swing, that hasn't stopped work at the state capitol. Governor Gretchen Whitmer Thursday signed legislation giving more resources to schools for safety and mental health. Among 3 bills she signed, one will put an extra $125 million towards the state's school aid fund.
This is a package of education bills that are going to help us improve our literacy outcomes, will help us fund school safety and bolster on-campus mental health resources. I want to thank all the Republicans and Democrats who voted for these common sense bills. Here in Michigan, we are proving that you can still work across the aisle and solve problems.
At least one Republican lawmaker that same day, however, criticized the move as a, quote, PR stunt, given the hundreds of millions of dollars less in school safety and mental health grant funding in this year's original budget compared to last year's. And in a flurry of signatures, Governor Whitmer signed 17 bills into law Tuesday. The bills ranged from hospital funding to the unionizing of an often overlooked sector of the healthcare industry. 2 of the bills having direct implications for here in West Michigan. One of these bills aims to expand healthcare access in rural Michigan through amending restrictions on funding. The bill hopes to achieve that by changing the definition of what a rural hospital is to include 3 more counties in the state, one of which is Muskegon County. The other, having an effect in West Michigan, provides appropriations funding for outdoor recreation. In total, 18 land acquisition projects and 35 development projects are to receive funding, including several grants for Ottawa and Kent counties. Other bills signed by Whitmer will see changes to Michigan's healthcare system. 2 of these bills are designed to allow individual home health care givers in Michigan to unionize and participate in collective bargaining. You can read about the rest of the bills at 13onyourside.com. And does the election have you feeling a bit worried, or are you anxious at the outcome? Well, you're far from alone. Up next, we spoke to an expert this season about how those feelings are becoming more and more common with voters and how to combat them. All of the back and forth and negative campaigning has a lot of people probably stressed out. Earlier this season, we talked with an expert and bring you some advice on how you can cope. Well, if you're feeling a lot of anxiety about the upcoming elections, you are far from alone, and it can be a lot to handle. And for some, it can even be debilitating, not being able to get off the couch the week of the election, waiting for results to come in. But this didn't just come out of nowhere. This entire season can cause a lot of anxiety for a lot of people.
I hear it from my patients all the time. Sometimes they get obsessed, they cannot leave it, but they still are hurting. They're like, I am frustrated, I'm feeling more anxious, I'm feeling burned out.
Dr. Arash Javanbakht works with this issue firsthand, so much so that he wrote a book on how to overcome it. But he says this kind of anxiety has been getting more common.
It has been increasing in terms of the focus of their attention on the politics, because at some point politics was part of your life. Now this has become the major part that defines us as people and our differences between each other.
With factors like social media, national rhetoric, and punditry, he says the encouragement of tribal thinking is often to blame, and letting one's anxiety build could cause even greater harm.
What I feed to my mind and brain defines my mental health. If all I'm getting is negativity, is fear, is danger, is threat perception, is exaggerated danger, then my attention only looks for all the negative.
And if we allow that to develop, it could evolve into anger.
Anger is always the other side of fear. And we see a lot of anger. We see people are not tolerant of each other. We see people are starting to see so often and too often the different as bad, as evil.
So how can we overcome it?
Emotions have energy, especially when it comes to such fundamental emotions like fear and anxiety. The energy is immense.
He says it's about harnessing that energy and putting it toward how you can make a positive impact.
So what are the good things I want to be passionate about and I want to advocate for? And how I can use this energy to, let's say, go campaign, go vote, talk to people, discuss, or even turn it to something for me to learn beyond what is being told to me that I should believe.
And that's the rundown for your week in Michigan politics. Be sure to keep up with all the top political stories of the day, both on air and online at 13onyourside.com. We'll see you next week.